I'm excited today to have Scott Joseph on the podcast. As the founder of Me Plus Ultra and the CEO at J&L Marketing, Scott excels in driving business growth, evidenced by a five-fold increase in his three Honda dealerships' values. Hosting the Business Bourbon and Cigars podcast, Scott delivers actionable business insights, fostering a community where leaders overcome challenges and scale new heights together. Scott, I'm thrilled you're here. Thanks for being on the show.
I couldn't thank you more. It's an honor. Thank you.
Welcome to Catalytic Leadership, the podcast designed to help leaders intentionally grow and thrive. Here is your host, author, and leadership and executive coach, Dr. William Attaway.
I would love to begin with you sharing a little bit of your story with our listeners, Scott, particularly around your journey and development as a leader. How did you get started?
Got to go way back. I'm old. How long you want this show to be?
We got at least 3 hours. So,
I was forced into leadership at a pretty young age. I'm not gonna go back to childhood, but I will say when I started J&L Marketing when I was 22 years old. So, wow. Whether you know what you're doing or not, you have to learn on the fly then. So I'd have to say that would be the beginning of it. So, I look back, I'm definitely much more mature, smarter, probably just more experienced now. I look back on a lot of mistakes that I made early, and hopefully I can pass on some information to help other people speed up their learning curves and avoid similar mistakes.
I think that's wisdom speaking right there. As the miles climb on the odometer, and I can relate. Hopefully we increase in wisdom and insight from what we experience along the way. I don't believe there's any such thing as a wasted experience.
That's right.
But the question is, are we going to be free and generous with what we've learned to help other people avoid some of the ditches we drove into?
That's right. I would say one of the bigger regrets I have, or one of the things I would have changed early on, is I was very isolated, very competitive, which I don't think there's anything wrong with being competitive, but
sure.
Very driven and feeling I could do and accomplish everything on my own. And I feel like if I had to start over, I would have been much more open-minded and willing to share a lot of the experiences, to be willing to listen a lot more, maybe form a lot more, different strategic alliances, even with potential competitors, because I think the growth could have happened quicker and on a much bigger scale. I'll say at this stage in my life, especially over the last 3 to 5 years, I'm an open book. I give, I expect nothing in return, and I do not do anything with any type of motive to get something back. And what I found is, and I think it's because I'm sincere when I say that, the more I give, it's almost as if the universe is rewarding me in some way. And it's almost, the more I give, the more things just seem to be falling in my lap lately. And it's hard to explain, but I can tell you it's a much more enjoyable process than the first 30 years.
Well, and I think that's brilliant. I mean, leading with generosity and leading with a scarcity mindset where you think it's all about you and building, your own kingdom. That's two different ways to lead.
That's right.
And people respond very differently to those two mindsets.
Very well said. You're 100% correct on that.
As you were building, your marketing agency first and then your dealerships, I mean, what are some of the things that you learned along the way as you learned to lead? Leading as a 22-year-old, that's special right there, because you don't have a ton of track that you can look back on and say, I can pull from that experience. You don't have a ton of that. What are some things that you learned along that way?
Well, and I grew up in a house where, so I played sports, and let's take this back, 30, you're talking 30, 35 years ago. The world was a different place then too.
Yeah.
Um, if you grew up in a sports environment, your coaches were hard on you. There were probably coaches that were doing things, saying things.
Yeah.
The tone of their voice or their delivery was much different than what they probably could get away with today.
That's
And
so true.
I grew up with that, and my dad was that way,
Yeah.
and had a great relationship with my dad. But he was hard on me in the sense that, he pulled no punches. I mean, he had no problem yelling at me and being pretty assertive and things like that. So when you go into having to lead at 22, that's what I knew.
Yeah.
And so if I knew, gosh, here we go, if I only knew then what I know now. And I think, no, don't get it worked.
Yeah.
But and we had an incredible culture early on in those companies. There was tremendous accountability, but there was also fear. Because I was very demanding on people. They were compensated well. I knew they were compensated well, and I probably leveraged that in a way I shouldn't have. And so I think that's one of the mistakes because, as I do these leadership retreats now, my leadership style today is polar opposite of what it was in my early 20s, which it should be, or we're not growing.
That's right.
But if I do a leadership retreat today, and it doesn't matter what mastermind topic we're talking about, it could be client retention, it can be employee retention, it can be just new acquisition, new sales growth, building sales strategies, it can be about marketing. At some point, inevitably, every conversation, every brainstorm at some point touches on culture and accountability. Every single one. And so as strong as our culture was good back then only because people were making money. And, I was 22. I was recruiting people about my age. We were all young. And, I recruited people that were like me, kind of. So, they all were into sports and they probably could take some of that I was dishing. And they were used to it the same way I was used to it. And so we liked similar interests. So, it was the type of culture that we'd work really hard, but we played hard too. And we'd go out and we'd do things together. So there was just some of my best friends, lifelong friends, came from that early stage in business. But I will say, to get more on topic for your question, the best thing I learned from in terms of what I think I passed down to employees in our team was we really wanted, for one, to hold ourselves accountable. But having said all that, everything we did was very client-centric. It was extremely, and no one taught me that, at least not in the first couple of years, until I dived into some Anthony Robbins training, a ton of Anthony Robbins training, a ton of Jay Abraham training, and I started understanding the value of a client, the value of that relationship, what the long-term value was, how you really grow a business. And I really just drilled into our teams, how to improve frequency and recency and how to grow our client base and what a great client experience was. Every process we did was just so focused on our client. And I will say that if I did one thing right more than anything else, was when I started J&L Marketing, it was not about the money for me. And that might sound weird when you're starting your own company, but more than the money, more than, I guess, the notoriety of having your business or whatever reputation you think that might create, I just wanted us to be great. And so to be great, that meant that customers or clients had to really talk about you in a great way and talk about how professional you were, how great the results were, how great the experience was in terms of ease of doing business with, and that they just had total faith in us and they would feel comfortable referring. And it was that focus that drove all of our process. Now, I will say, once we started scaling, once we started growing, and I'm talking maybe 10 years in at this point, early 2000s, I lost sight of that.
Yeah.
And there was a stretch of maybe 10 years. It's weird how you go in waves.
Yeah.
There was a stretch of maybe 10 years where I started letting money rule my decisions instead of staying
Right.
true to my core and my true value. And I started thinking, oh, we can make a little bit if I do this, or if I do this. And I started taking a little bit from a sales rep here, tweaking their pay plan, saying, well, I don't want to eat the whole part of this investment. I could get a little from over here. I can do this. I can do that. And when you start making those decisions, you'll never realize what it does to the culture of your business.
Hmm.
The loyalty you had starts to dissipate. Your overall enjoyment isn't the same because you're no longer doing things for the real why you got into that business to begin with. And so fortunately, at some point you recognize I'm creating my own problems here. I need to get back to what made us phenomenal, and that happened as well. So, but that's some early, I guess, some very big picture scenarios of us starting through, and as we worked our way through and matured as a company.
Yeah, I think your journey is not terribly unique because
No,
you started where you were, you learned, you grew, you adapted, you adjusted, you took everything you were learning and you began to implement and execute on that and grow until you are where you are now. And one of the things, and we talked about this previously, that I really appreciate as I was researching you and learning more about what you do, one of the things I loved to see was that you don't just see every experience in your life and everything you've learned as something that's just for you. You want to pass that on. You want to
yeah,
share that with other people so that they can benefit. So
I,
maybe
I,
they'll avoid some of the ditches.
yeah, listen. What I do now with Me Plus Ultra,
Yeah.
it's so funny. I literally, first off, I invest a lot of my growth, especially early on. You know, when I started J&L Marketing, my first company was the agency. When I started that, I had all the people, whether they were close friends or family, telling me not to do it. And the reason they were telling me not to do it, not because they didn't want to see me succeed, they were trying to protect me. They knew I had no experience in running a business. I had no idea what I was doing. I was only 22 years old. And so, you got people like your mom who's values security, right? That's a high value for her. They're trying to protect me. And I just, fortunately, at 22, living at home, you can afford to take some risk that I probably couldn't take if I was 35 with kids and married, right? With mortgages and
That's right.
everything else. So I took those chances. And I remember telling people, I said, listen, I can sell, because that had been what I was doing up to that point. I said, I know I can sell. I can learn the rest. And that's what I did. And so I just feel like, but in terms of passing it on, I invest a lot of money early on in self-development. I continue to this day. That has never stopped for me. I mean, just a year ago, I went down to Costa Rica for 2 weeks, and it was all about finding my purpose. And I say that because I'd gotten these businesses over the last 30 years, whether it's the dealerships or the agency, I'd worked them to a point where I had managing partners. I could walk away for years, and in many cases, they'd probably grow faster if I wasn't around. And so, because I sometimes I can get in the way, right? And they're the ones they're in the trenches. They're the ones with the clients in talking to them the most. And so what happens is you work so hard to get to that place. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs think, oh, I'm going to put in that grind. I'm going to work. I'm going to work. I'm going to work. And you get it to a part where you can finally enjoy all that travel and you've got that all those comforts and luxurious lifestyle. But you realize, and at some point, every successful entrepreneur or business person asks themselves, is this all there is?
Mhm.
And that comes sooner for some people, but eventually, and it probably doesn't matter how successful, right? Because everybody's got their different scales of what that means to them. But they are going to ask, and I was not fulfilled. And I had accomplished all. Beautiful wife, loving wife, very supportive, beautiful family. All my businesses are successful. At this point, I've made more than I probably ever dreamed I would. So all those comforts on paper, you're sitting there saying, wow, that is, how could he not be fulfilled? Something was missing. And basically what I would go through in my head is I'd say, you know what? I know there's more out there. I'm not happy because we need to grow it faster. We need more market share. Maybe I'm just comfortable here now and that's not making me happy anymore. So I need to make more money. And so I keep doubling down on stuff that wasn't making me happy, that I didn't enjoy doing.
Yeah.
And it was compounding the problem, right? And so what basically it comes down to, what used to excite me became mundane to me.
Wow.
I was no longer living my purpose. Early on, these businesses were my purpose. That was what I loved it. And that's where Me Plus Ultra come in. And so you talk about sharing it with others. That's what this all is. Because what I realized, I get more joy. I feel like I'm very good at uniting people, that whether they have diverse skill sets, I want them to have good vision. And I love like saying, hey, I'm going to introduce you to John over here, or Larry over here, or Susan, because I know that if you guys get together, some magic's going to happen, and it makes sense for you guys to at least talk. And I love watching that happen. That's what gives me joy. And I feel like I do have knowledge to give. I'm not a consultant or anything like that, but we do these leadership retreats that are in person. We do mastermind sessions virtually. And I'm telling you right now, I work harder now in the last 10 years, or I work harder in these last 2 years since starting this company than I have in the last 10, probably combined. But it doesn't feel like work anymore. It goes back to, every new entrepreneur knows what I'm talking about, right? It's a grind, and it's a lot of effort, time, effort, and money. But it doesn't feel like it's work because you love it. And that's where I've come full circle on that. And so, I live a life of purpose, and I want to make sure that every decision I make moving forward fulfills it. So,
Scott, that is so incredible. And I think a lot of people are where you were. They keep chasing the foggy mist that is more.
yes.
Well, if I just grab onto that, that'll be enough. That'll be enough. And it's never enough.
That's right.
And through Me Plus Ultra, you have found purpose.
Correct.
Talk to me about that. What is Me Plus?
I create my purpose. It's not about finding it. I think it's about creating it. And so recognizing when we enjoy something and when we don't, it's our body's way of basically telling us and steering us in a direction. We don't always follow it though. And so when I started recognizing, man, it got to a point in my businesses, some of the day-to-day stuff that I had to do, I just dreaded it. I hated it.
Yeah.
And as I got into this business, I had to do a lot of day-to-day things. And I'd go into some of these things and I'm like, why am I doing this? I could be on a beach, I can be relaxing. But when I get off those calls or I get off doing that task, I am at level 10. I'm on a muscle. I'm ready to roll. And and I have to remind myself, first off, it confirms that I know I'm on the right path for me. Being authentic to who I am. But at the same time, I remind myself before those tasks where I feel like that, I got to take this call or I got to do this, that think about how you're going to feel when when it's done, right? When this call's done or whatever. And it's an easy reminder. I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm.
No, this
Go
is
ahead.
great. Talk to me about Me Plus Ultra, about the mastermind groups that you started here, this company. Who
Yeah.
is this for? And what is the goal of these groups?
Yeah. So it's, I want high growth entrepreneurs in the group. I want C-suite executives, industry innovators. I want like-minded people. All the people in this group are ambitious. All the people they want transformation in terms of their business and their life. That's what they're really looking for. And it's really a 1 + 1 = 3 type scenario, because this all started from COVID.
Yes.
I had no idea I wanted to do this. It's not like one day I woke up and said, you know what? I need to start a mastermind group. What happened was I started doing something and realized how much enjoyment I got out of it and figured a business model out of that. So when I say create my purpose, that's what I mean. So I've got something I'm very passionate about and figured out a business model with it. And so Me Plus Ultra kind of started in reverse. Most mastermind groups form, then they start doing, if they're going to do eventually, if they're doing virtual events, then maybe they might add a live in-person event. We're in COVID, and at that time I was heavily involved in just the auto industry.
Mhm.
And the agency, 90% of its clients at that time was auto. And we're sitting there, and I had a good friend up in New Jersey, Sandy Cerami. We're in 2 weeks, right after, they shut down the NCAA tournament. No one knows what the heck's going on. We're all locked in. We're not allowed to leave our houses. Some of these dealers weren't even, like in the state of Pennsylvania, they weren't even allowed to sell cars online. So, oh yeah. So there was a lot of uncertainty. Things were moving very fast, and there was a lot of fear and panic. And so, Sandy calls me up and he goes, man, we gotta help some people. He goes, what if we did a Zoom call and invited a bunch of the dealers on there, and maybe get a CPA, a marketing person, a lawyer, an HR person, and we start talking about, here's the issues we're all dealing with, figure out how people are handling them. If we need legal advice or an opinion, at least, we can get it. Same with the CPA and the HR person, things like that. And man, they were going over great. And so eventually, after a few weeks of that, if you'll remember back in early 2000, the first half of 2020, after about a month or two, we're still all locked in our house.
That's right.
And we're all craving like social in-person interactions, right? So that's why everybody started Zooming and doing Zoom meetings and fun things like that. So Sandy goes to me, goes, hey, this Friday at 5, happy hour. Why don't you grab a bourbon, grab a cigar. Let's do a Zoom meeting, you and I, just you and I, and we'll brainstorm on how to make these online meetings better for everybody. So we're doing it. 3 hours. We did that. We planned an hour. 3 hours, but we were loving it. We were having, because think about it. You're having a bourbon. You're doing your cigar. You're enjoying it. We had pages of notes, and we got off that, and we literally at the end said, "Man, that's probably one of the most productive meetings we've ever had." So that goes on for a couple of weeks. We added a third person, the president of J&L Marketing, my agency, and we realized, because on your phone, when the Zoom, you got the boxes, right? And we had the fourth box was empty. And so we said, we need to come up with this. We'll call it the fourth box. We need to add one of these dealer clients or prospects or just dealership owners and invite them in to these things once a week. We'll call it the fourth box. We told on the next week's Zoom call, we said, guys, we're going to do this thing called the fourth box. It's invite only. If you're interested, let us know. I said, we're going to talk business. We're going to do a bourbon. We're going to have a cigar. I said, you don't have to check all 3 boxes, but we prefer 2 of the 3. If you know nothing about business, that's fine, as long as you're good with the bourbon and the cigar. And then they're all laughing. And man, we had a line. And then we start doing these meetings. And once again, it was just like the original one with Sandy and I. Here I had prospects that if I had called them, all right, and just cold call them or tried to set up meetings with them, it would not have given us the time of day. We're on these phone calls 2-3 hours, scheduled for an hour. We couldn't get them off the phone. I mean, think about that. And say we're having fun and pages of notes, and it was becoming valuable. So later in that year, we were like, I think people were fed up with this, not seeing anybody. And in 3 weeks, we planned our first live event.
Wow.
From the idea saying we're going to do it, to when it happened was a 3-week thing. We only had 13 people, but they flew in from all over the country, those 13 people. We had maybe 2 people from right here in Louisville. We did distillery tours out of Buffalo Trace. We did a Hermitage Farm thing, which was incredible. But the goal of that in person was, how do we create an event that's different, that's unique? I didn't want a bunch of speakers up there talking about stuff we already know 95% of it. Yeah. I wanted something that these guys could get real value. So when we do our events, they're true masterminds.
Yeah.
They're real mastermind events where each session, let's say it's on client retention, they're 2.5 hours. You spend the first 20 minutes on your own stuff. Then we bring everybody together and they start sharing ideas, what they like about everybody's idea, how they'd improve it and stuff like that. By the end, you have an action step, an action plan that can take your business to multiple levels higher. And I guess through that process, by the end of the 2.5 days, half these people I never knew other than Zoom. I'm best friends with these are some of my best friends. I say that I am blown away. The people in my life over the last 2 years. So when I say give and give, and there's been unexpected consequences, and I don't say unexpected benefits, opportunities, whether it's new business opportunities, but just the pure friendships of these people. It's real connections. And then you get the feedback, wow, this was completely different than anything I've done. That just makes me feel, I can't express it, how it makes me feel. And that's when I knew I was onto something. I can't do an event every week. I can't do an event every day. And so then it backed into Me Plus Ultra, so that's when I say it was a reverse of the norm. That's what I mean. It's a long story. So.
Which so good. And this gave birth to the podcast, right?
Well, I had another podcast for J&L Marketing called Move, Crush, Count. But yes, as I broke off business, bourbon, and cigars, I knew it. I wanted to make the leadership retreat an extra bonus added value to Me Plus Ultra. And if I have a podcast called Me Plus Ultra, no one's going to know what the heck that means, right? So, but business, bourbon, and cigars made more sense from a podcast name than Me Plus Ultra, and that's what I did. So yeah, that's going well.
So talk about the podcast, because that's one of the newer pieces of what you're building.
Yeah.
What is the show about, and who are the type of guests that you have on?
I want once again high growth entrepreneurs. I want C-suite executives. I want business owners.
Yeah.
I do take an occasional consultant, but I'm on different services to help me get guests and this and that, and I get bombarded by consultants. And I have no problem with. Yeah, I have no problem, but I want people that have been in the trenches and are doing it and can teach it. So when I bring on a consultant, like I don't just bring on the business coach. I don't bring that person on. But when there's a niche that I know if there's a consultant that has a niche, I had one on that I interviewed 2 days ago that specializes in helping people find the right franchises, and also if they want to become a franchise. So he consults and walks them through that step. To me, that was interesting because I base my guest on what my members want out of Me Plus Ultra.
Love that.
Right. And so it goes back to being client-centric. And
That's
so I sit there and we have a lot of franchisees, and we also have people that have a couple businesses in the group that make sense to become potential franchises. So I thought this could bring great value to them. I brought in, coming from the marketing side, another consultant I brought in his niche was he goes in and helps people identify with certainty what makes them different, what makes them unique.
Cool.
And after the show, I will, his name is Barry LeBeouf. So you and I met on a site that helped coordinate and unite us, right? He's on there. So I recommend you reach out to him. He's a phenomenal interview, and he brings his content, what he brings to the table is very specific. It's actionable, and that's what I like. And so to me, we were a marketing agency. The longest business I've had is J&L Marketing. We're phenomenal at marketing for our clients. For the first, we've been in business 33 years.
Wow.
Up until the last 2, we were the worst company possible marketing ourselves. All right.
Not
we could sell. Yeah, we could sell, but we couldn't market ourselves at all. And we had a hard time hiring someone to do it because we knew that's what we should be able to do. Right. And so we never did it. And so we're much better at it today, but I will say it shouldn't take you 30-something years to figure that out. But what he does, and what I thought, because I know there's other business, I see the marketing that they do, especially these entrepreneurs, and they do not have a unique selling proposition, a value statement that's articulated clearly. Donald Miller, Bill Preach, right? Have this clear message, articulate it in this way, make it simple, all this type of stuff. But he doesn't tell you necessarily how to figure out what to say in terms of what truly makes you unique and different, that a prospect will say, I have to go with them because, man, if I don't have that, or if I'm looking at companies that don't do it that way, that one thing that makes them unique, and it's usually two or three things that make them really unique, there's no way I'm going to succeed the way I want to, right? Yeah. And Barry walked us through that show and how he gets to that stage, or to that end, I guess, product of identifying that. So those are the type of consultants I'd bring on the show. I want someone that, I don't want just general fluff crap. Does that make sense?
100%. 100%. I get 30 to 40 requests a week to be on this show.
Yeah.
And through so many different services, and a lot just direct in LinkedIn and email.
Yep.
I totally get it. Some of them it's just not a good fit, and some of them I'm like, I need something a little more, actionable.
Well, let me. Can I ask you a question?
Please.
What shows have you done that one or two that you come to your mind that you're like, I wish all my shows were exactly like this one? That's a kick butt show. And what type of guest was that?
Guest who brought clarity.
Yeah.
I one of the things I work with clients on is developing clarity around the type of leader they want to be, the type of life they want to live. I believe clear-minded focus is a first step in achieving that. Most people don't have it because most people aren't asking the right questions, and you'll never get the right answers if you're asking the wrong questions. I can think of 2 guests straight up who brought insane levels of clarity, and people could listen to those. And those are two of the highest listened to, highest rated episodes we have, because people listened and they took action, because there were very specific actionable steps where they could apply what they heard.
You know why they were probably listened to more than the others? For all the reasons you just said, but because of those reasons, people felt compelled to share them. People said, this was valuable. You know, Mary, you've got similar situations to what you got to listen to this. Listen to this. They're telling their peers, listen to this show. And isn't it amazing how clarity, in terms of what the value you bring to someone, right? And in your case, you're trying to bring clarity in terms of whatever topic you're interviewing on.
Yeah.
It's just a magic formula, isn't it?
Well, I believe clarity is kindness.
Yeah.
You know, and I believe the clearer we are with ourselves first, then with those around us, and then with those we're serving, the clearer we are, the more clarity we bring, the better leader we become.
Yeah.
The less clarity we have, that's just not kind. That's not kind to anybody.
Yeah. That's a great way that's a great way to say it. I'm going to steal that. I'll give you credit the first 2 times I use it, and then
then it's yours. That's right. I usually say the first 3 times. After the first 3, it's mine. That's right.
Because you're kinder. You're a kinder person than I am.
Oh my, Scott, anybody who spends 10 seconds with you begins to understand that you have a mindset that is focused on learning and growing. And this is hardwired into you.
And you know what's weird?
Curious.
I hated school. I hated it.
That's not what I mean. I am not talking about school. I'm talking about a teachable spirit. I'm talking about somebody who understands that they can learn from anybody and anything. Sometimes you learn what not to do, but you have that learning posture.
Thank you.
I see that.
Thank you. I do. I'm not saying I get along with everybody, but I definitely get along. I can easily get along with just about any type of person.
Yeah.
Regardless of politics, beliefs, all this other stuff. It doesn't mean I get along with everybody, but it's not because of their belief systems. It's not because of, it's just, you're not clicking, right?
Sure.
Whatever it might be. I do feel like there is value in just about everybody.
Yes.
I believe that. That's why when I get people, I am not afraid to have people on my team that think completely different from me.
Absolutely.
I love when people challenge the way I think.
That's how we get better.
Correct. We've talked about leadership at the beginning. I'm the type of leader that if I really believe in my idea, I'm going to do everything in my power to convince you and sell you to where I get consensus.
Yes.
However, if there's strong enough people in that room and someone comes to me with data and logic, it is equally compelling.
Yes.
I have no problem saying, yeah, you know what? My idea sucks. That's a much better idea. I have no problem. Yeah.
The best idea wins.
Correct.
Not the title on the door.
That's right. 100%.
That's a healthy leader. That is a healthy leader leading in a healthy way.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. As somebody who comes with that posture, how do you stay on top of your game? How do you level up with new leadership skills that your business and your team are going to need you to have a year from now or 5 years from now? Because you don't have them yet. How are you doing that?
Well, now it's easy for me. And so I'll say that, but then I'll go backwards to before this, right? With the Mastermind group, I'm bringing in the leaders I have in the room, and it's a diverse group. Yeah. So we have people in this group that make a couple $100,000 a year. I have people in this group that make 50 million plus a year. So it's all over the board, but it's amazing how much even those guys, the top level guys, income earners, learn and get ideas from some of the new people, especially on technology and different things. It's also diverse in industries, but when they get together and we're working through these masterminds, and it's how to build a winning culture, whatever it might be, I just learn when we talk about AI topics, when we talk about, it's just now I'm actually learning more now without having to find it. It's all in front of me. It's what I do. And so that's easy. So prior to that, right, prior to starting Me Plus Ultra, I do a lot of reading. I love reading books. And so when I see books on topics I know I have a blind spot on, or I think there's a lot of room for improvement, I see all the books behind you, right? So
I love to read.
yeah, almost every book I read is some type of self-improvement, self-development. If you come into my office at home, there might be 5 books in that thing, and it's a lot of books. There might be 5 that are not self-development or some type of self-improvement, whether it's improving business stuff, whether it's me personally. That it's when I say, self-development, I mean that I'm looking at myself. I got plenty of business books as well, that it's all about improving the business. And so I read a lot, and usually from those books, I'm introduced to people, whether it's the author or whatever, and thanks to the internet, right? You start Googling, you start finding more information. I attend a lot of workshops. I do a lot of different events. I don't know if you go to, I just started a podcast. My first one, it was pre-COVID. So gosh, it seems like it was only a couple of years, but pre-COVID. So it's probably 6 years, right?
In a minute. Yeah.
A couple years into that, I had no idea they had conventions for podcasters.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you've ever been to Podfest down in Orlando,
Not yet. No.
I would advise that. I've actually got members in my group that I met at that conference. Another great friend that I met at the first conference I went to, he's actually coming into Louisville next week. We're going to dinner. But I learned a ton from that. And, I've been to Inbound up there for HubSpot before. So I do these things, and I'm exposed to these different people. And I used to be very early in my life, very an introvert, so to speak, I guess. I was in sales, and I had to force myself to be good in sales. I had to get out of that comfort zone. It was not comfortable for me at all to do that. I hated it. What Me Plus Ultra has done, I'll give you an example. You go to a typical networking event, right? Or leadership retreat, whatever, and you go there with the best intentions, and one of 2 things ultimately usually happens to 95% of the people in the room. Either you run into someone you know, and you end up talking all night to that one person, right? Which you already knew. You didn't need to do that. And you did that because that was comfortable, right?
Yep.
Or you're out there and you're getting business cards. You walk away with 20, 30 business cards, and no one ever, out of those exchanges, no one ever talks to each other again. Because there's no real connection. You didn't forge any real relationship. There was no value brought to anything. And so one of the lucky things that happened early on with what we noticed with Business Bourbon Cigars, this was not planned. There was no strategy or design by this. And looking back, we know why it works. When we do these mastermind sessions, we might have 3 or 4 per event. Well, every mastermind session, I have table assignments. So by the end of the 2 days, at some point, you've worked with almost everybody in the room. And so in the second half of the day, when we have our activities and our excursions, and, you're doing your networking breakfast, your lunches, your dinners, and we're doing bourbon tours and whatever fun things we're doing, there's no awkwardness. You've worked with everybody. You've been helping. They've been helping you. You've been helping them. And so all those walls are down. And so the networking becomes that much better. And I think I forget what got us on this topic. You asked a really good question, and I don't know if I answered it.
How are you
Some
growing?
yes, yeah. Oh, you asked how I continue to learn, right?
Yes,
Continue
that's
to,
right. Yeah.
and so I think now when I go to these conferences, now I'm gonna come full circle. Here we go.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not being very clear. My clarity is not the best. So this will be your lowest downloaded episode. No,
Not a chance. Not a chance.
so so when I go to these conferences, what I used to avoid meeting people,
Yeah.
I used to just go pay attention to the content, go to my next thing. And if you think about it, that aligned very well with the first half of my career, where it was
Mm.
very isolated and very just self-driven.
Mhm. Yeah.
Now, and I think Me Plus Ultra and these business bourbon and cigar events have made me more comfortable. I would not put myself in an introvert category anymore.
Mm.
Almost extroverted now, and it's a weird shift. I enjoy. Uh, my wife we just had a baby 2 years ago, and
Congratulations. It's
thank you.
exciting.
Well, 3 weeks after, I had a business trip I had to go out to in California, and it's the
Oh,
type of trip that was very, very even mix of social and fun. So it would be something normally she would have attended with me. So I had to go out there, and there were going to be all these people that knew each other. There were going to be all these people. All the clicks were already there. All the networking relationships already formed. I'm the new guy that knows no one.
mm.
And you know what? It was one of the best trips. I mean, it was awesome. Once again, strong relationships, and I think I don't know if it's just the stuff that I don't know if it's I just feel more comfortable or it's just some things I learned that I do at my own events that just seem to work. I don't, but whatever it is, I'm happy about it because it's much more enjoyable.
Mm.
But that's how I learn. I go to events, I read books, and I'm online nonstop.
So is there, and I ask all the guests this, is there a book that has made a big difference to you? One that you would recommend anybody listening, if they haven't read this, they have to pick it
Well,
up.
well, there was one I will say. Well, first off, the books that I highly recommend any Anthony Robbins book. So those are more personal development. Um, my initiation into personal development, besides sales training type tapes, started with him. Unlimited Power. I've taken multiple weekend classes, done a lot of his week-long events. But getting back to books, the book that helped me the most was not a published book. It was a book that Jay Abraham did. I think he sold it for like $300 or $400, right? It was his, and I got an email campaign, brilliantly written, right? But no, it was back then. It was actually a direct mail sales letter that was like 20 pages long.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Well, he writes it, and I read it all. That was what was so. That's why I bought the book. I was like, well, son of a bitch, I just read a 20-page direct mail piece on. It's got to be a good book. It was so compelling, and so that book, because it covered everything I needed to know, it was like my Bible. And if I
Mm.
still have this book at home, this book is about I'd say 2 to 3 inches thick. And if you I had it here in front of me, you'll see sticky note tabs. If I opened it up, you'll see notes. And I still any business I've started, I use it as a resource to this day.
Mm.
A published book I read called The Loyalty Effect, but this is going back 15, 20 years ago. I think it was a Harvard Business Review book. Did a great job of explaining the loyalty effect in terms of not just clients, but employees, shareholders, investors, things like that, and that triangle and how they all need to work together. I think that a lot of ways that goes back to client centricity, and it aligned very well with what I had learned from Jay Abraham in terms of the only 3 ways to grow a business: frequency, recency, and growing that active customer base, or increasing average transaction value, recent or frequency, and growing the customer base. I more recently, God, I've read so many books. in the last, say, 2 years. I'll tell you a book that I really enjoyed about 2 years ago. So I told you I was trying to figure out, what is my purpose here? This isn't. And I started reading books, Dream Big. I started reading some of those books and realized, you know what, Scott? Part of your problem and the reason you know the direction you need to go, but you haven't done it. You think you're a risk taker, right? So what are you afraid of? And the reality is, I think when you become successful, one of the things that challenge you, I'm not talking about buying another business. If I bought another dealership, I'll do that all day long. That doesn't scare me at all. But starting this mastermind group, why was I delaying it? Probably ego. It was probably like, what if people don't want to join my group? What if that would be a blow to my ego, right? What if I'm not successful at it? I've never started this before. And so I used to think I had no comfort zone. But the reality is, I think I had more of a comfort zone later in life than I did in the beginning. And it was almost like, well, I don't want to lose this authority or credibility or image that I thought I had in my own mind about what other people might think of me. I could destroy all that if I start this thing that I don't know what I'm doing and fail at it. And I think there were some hidden insecurities that I just got rid of and went forward with.
Scott, I feel like we could talk for another hour.
All
This has been so brilliant, so much insight from your story so far. And I believe the best is yet to come with you. And I can't wait to see what's going to be next, what the next chapter is going to look like.
So funny you say that. I thank you, first off, for saying that. I did a podcast 3 days ago. I mentioned earlier I went down to Costa Rica for a 2-week I worked on myself mentally it was exhausting. It was bell to bell. And I interviewed her again just a few days ago. And I told everybody on that podcast, I said, prior to working with her, if you asked me where I was at in my entrepreneurial journey, I would have said in the second half, I'm winding it down. I'm not because it's just nearing the end. I just thought, well, I've been doing it for 30 years. It seems like the natural thing. I can't be in the first half. If you ask me today where I'm at, I'm just like you just said, I'm just beginning. And that's what it feels like. And that's a much better way to wake up every day.
No doubt.
So I really appreciate you saying that, actually.
I've always been encouraged by Peter Drucker.
Oh, yeah.
Peter wrote so much about management, about leadership, just such a giant in the field. And you may not know this, I learned this not too many years ago, that Peter wrote 2/3 of what he wrote. 2/3 of his books were published after he turned 65. 2/3 of what we know as the body of work of this giant in the field happened after most people hang it up.
Oh.
How inspiring is that to realize?
I didn't know that. I didn't know that about him. I knew Warren Buffett made most of his income after 50, but I didn't know that about Drucker.
It's just fascinating to me, and such an illustration that, if you're not dead, you're not done.
That's right.
And all the insight and all the experience and all the wisdom that you have gained along the way is not just for you. It can be used for the benefit of those around you. And I think that's what you are doing now in your next chapter. And I can't wait to see where that goes.
You asked me books. I'm probably one of the only entrepreneurs or business people that waited till after 50 to read Think and Grow Rich.
Oh, wow.
Can you believe that? I read a lot of books, but I did. And it's also another thing that helped me realize when I tell you that, why was I so isolated? How dumb? How much more? How much faster could the businesses have grown? How much bigger could they have scaled to? More importantly, what are the relationships I missed out on along the way, thinking, crush the competition, just go at it, go, I need no help from anybody. Versus all these tight icons and just titans, they all build it working together and pulling knowledge
Yes.
out of everyone else. And it's just it's not just a better way to do it. It's more enjoyable.
That's right.
It's so, yeah.
So true.
Uh,
Scott, I know our listeners are going to want to continue to learn from you and stay connected. What is the best way for them to do that?
I think if they go to meplusultra.com, so meplusultra.com, I've got resources on there. For one, I've got my podcast is hosted on there along with on all the other podcast platforms, but also got a couple ebooks. One is on client centricity, and these are not typical ebooks. There's nothing more frustrating to me. You talked about clarity and actionable stuff. There's nothing more frustrating to me when I download an ebook because I'm like, oh yeah, I could use, and then it's just fluff.
Yes.
This is great content, and I've also got another one on building a winning culture, and it goes into accountability, or building a winning, a culture of accountability. And so I don't even you won't have to put it. You can go get them. You can download them. You don't even have to give me an email. So it's when I say I give. I just go on there, and I'd love to get their feedback on it. If anybody from your show downloads it and gets it, send me a message, do whatever. I'm on all the social channels. So
I love that. Scott, thank you for your generosity today, of your time and all that you've learned so far, and for sharing it so freely with us.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks for joining me for this episode today. As we wrap up, I'd love for you to do two things. First, subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. And if you find value here, I'd love it if you would rate it and review it. That really does make a difference in helping other people to discover this podcast. Second, if you don't have a copy of my newest book, Catalytic Leadership, I'd love to put a copy in your hands. If you go to catalyticleadershipbook.com, you can get a copy for free. Just pay the shipping so I can get it to you, and we'll get one right out. My goal is to put this into the hands of as many leaders as possible. This book captures principles that I've learned in 20 plus years of coaching leaders in the entrepreneurial space, in business, government, nonprofits, education, and the local church. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn to keep up with what I'm currently learning and thinking about. And if you're ready to take a next step with a coach to help you intentionally grow and thrive as a leader, I'd be honored to help you. Just go to catalyticleadership.net to book a call with me. Stay tuned for our next episode next week. Until then, as always, leaders, choose to be catalytic.
Thanks for listening to Catalytic Leadership with Dr. William Attaway. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss the next episode. Want more? Go to catalyticleadership.net.